Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really challenging one, the Black Mirror episode, the National Anthem.
It certainly makes an impact.
It does. We want to try and understand why this story, which has, let's face it, a pretty unbelievable premise, still resonates so much. Our goal, really, is to unpack our, enduring fascination with watching others, particularly when they're put in these incredibly exposed situations, and maybe how that makes us, the audience, kind of complicit.
It's a jarring way to start the series, isn't it? A royal gets kidnapped and the demand is just so transgressive, almost absurd.
Totally.
But I think it's that shock value, exactly that, which lets the episode explore some very real and frankly uncomfortable things about human behavior and our relationship with the media.
Yeah, definitely. So for anyone who maybe hasn't seen it in a while or perhaps hasn't seen it at all, let's just quickly map out the core plot of the National Anthem.
Okay.
You have Princess Susanna, who's clearly a much-loved public figure, and she's abducted.
Right.
But the ransom isn't money. It's not your typical political demand. Instead, the kidnapper puts out this, horrifying ultimatum.
Yes, Prime Minister Michael Callow has to perform a sexual act with a pig. Live. On national television to get her back safely.
Yeah. And what's really striking from the get-go is how the kidnapper gets this demand out there.
Not through the usual channels, the news networks or anything.
No, it pops up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And just explodes, goes viral almost instantly.
Which really underscores the power, even back then, of these digital platforms.
Yeah.
How they can just bypass the traditional gatekeepers, and grab everyone's attention directly.
Exactly. And the government, their first instinct is naturally try to shut it down, keep a lid on it.
Which, of course, fails spectacularly.
Utterly. The public gets wind of it, the media latches on, and it just becomes this massive consuming story.
And then the government tries to get clever, planning to fake it.
Right. Use a porn actor, some digital trickery to put Callow's face on him.
But the kidnappers ahead of them exposes that plan almost immediately.
And that feels like a real turning point, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because then the kidnapper escalates things dramatically. He sends a severed finger.
Which we later find out is his own, not the princess's.
Crucially, yes. But at the time, coupled with this really upsetting video clip, it completely changes the public mood.
Yeah, that initial disgust, the horror at the demand, it starts to shift.
It morphs into this huge public pressure on the prime minister. People start demanding he do it to save her.
It's chilling. And under all that pressure, plus threats to his own family, Callow eventually agrees. He does the unthinkable.
It's broadcast everywhere, globally. The episode suggests something like, 1.3 billion people watched?
An absolutely staggering number.
But then comes the twist, the really cynical part.
Princess Susanna was actually released 30 minutes before the broadcast even started.
Unharmed. And that crucial piece of information was deliberately kept for the prime minister.
While the kidnapper himself, revealed to be this Turner Prize-winning artist, Carlton Bloom,
he commits suicide during the broadcast.
So Bloom's motive wasn't ransom. It wasn't political gain in the usual sense. It was, in his view, a statement.
A piece of performance art, essentially.
Yeah.
Designed to expose what he saw as society's morbid curiosity, our obsession with spectacle, and how the media feeds that.
So the art wasn't just the act with the pig.
No, it was the whole thing. The societal reaction, the media frenzy, the forced participation of Callow, and importantly, the complicity of that huge global audience.
The demand itself is designed to strip him bare, literally and figuratively, rob him of all privacy, all dignity for everyone to watch.
Exactly. It perfectly sets up this really intense, very uncomfortable look at voyeurism and spectacle that we want to get into.
Okay, so let's dive into that. This fascination with spectacle, it feels very modern sometimes, with 247 news, social media everywhere. But when you look back, this urge to watch dramatic, sometimes awful, sometimes humiliating things, it's not new at all.
Not even close. I mean, think about the Roman Empire, the Colosseum, gladiatorial games.
The classic example.
Right. And these weren't just, sports. They were huge planned spectacles.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of people watching, from emperors down to ordinary citizens.
And the audience had a say, didn't they? Thumbs up, thumbs down for the gladiators.
Exactly. Which kind of foreshadows, in a way, our own digital power to amplify or condemn things today. And it wasn't just gladiators fighting.
No, there were animal hunts, public executions.
Criminals, Christians being thrown to lions. It was a whole menu of violence and drama, often paid for by the powerful to keep the public happy.
Bread and circuses.
So spectacle tied to social control right from the start.
Definitely. Then you move into, say, medieval Europe. Public punishments were central civic events. Hangings, burnings, beheadings.
All done out in the open.
Deliberately so. They weren't just punishment, they were performances. Meant to show everyone the power of the rulers, the church, and what happens if you step out of line. The executioner is like the embodiment of state power.
And the methods were often symbolic too, right? Depending on the crime. Yes. Tailored to the transgression and the person's status, really driving the message home, making the suffering a very visible warning.
And it wasn't just about death sentences. There were lesser punishments, too, designed for public humiliation.
Oh yeah, the stocks, the pillory. People locked up in public squares, open to abuse, ridicule.
Symbolic things, too, like dunce caps or forcing people to wear signs describing their offense.
Even much later, you see echoes. Think about the head shaving of women accused of collaborating with Nazis in France after World War II. Very public, very shaming.
And going back further, Roman crucifixion was designed as much for public humiliation as for the agony itself.
Absolutely. And then perhaps one of the most disturbing examples, the public spectacle lynchings in the U.S., particularly between, say, the late 1870s and the mid-20th century.
Targeting African Americans.
Primarily, yes. These weren't hidden acts. They were advertised. Carnival events. Thousands of white people would attend, including community leaders.
It's horrific to even contemplate.
The level of torture, mutilation, people taking body parts as souvenirs. It's this awful intersection of racial terror, performative violence, and community complicity. It shows how deep this capacity for consuming public suffering can go.
So this long, brutal history exists. Then mass media comes along. The printing press, photography, film, TV. How did that change things?
Well, it massively expanded the audience, didn't it? Suddenly, stories and pictures of sensational events, executions even, could reach far beyond the town square.
Made the spectacle portable, in a way.
Exactly. Early TV, especially live broadcasts of major events, created these shared national moments.
Yeah.
Even if it was mostly one-way communication back then, people just watching it got us used to consuming mediated spectacles. Paved the way for the interactive stuff we have now.
But even with these shifts in technology, the underlying human drivers seem pretty consistent.
I think so. That desire to experience things vicariously, to feel strong emotions, even negative ones, to see moral boundaries tested or reinforced, or maybe just the thrill of seeing something forbidden.
Technology just gives those impulses new outlets, amplifies them.
It enables and scales them up, definitely, but it doesn't seem to invent them. And across all these examples, you see spectacle being used to control, to draw lines around acceptable behavior. The audience, just by being there, by watching, kind of endorses those lines.
It's a powerful dynamic. This history really sets the stage for understanding the audience in the national anthem. Let's get into the psychology behind it. Why are we drawn to this stuff?
Okay, well, one obvious starting point is voyeurism.
Which usually has a sort of clinical sexual connotation.
It does, traditionally, yes. Interest in watching private acts. But we can think about it more broadly here, as a kind of societal urge to see things we're not supposed to see, the private lives, the sensational moments, the vulnerabilities of others. Reality TV, social media feeds, they tap into this.
And in the national anthem, it's mass voyeurism on an epic scale.
Absolutely. Watching the ultimate private degradation made utterly public. The fall of someone powerful, the exposure of intense vulnerability. It's the illicit thrill of witnessing the forbidden.
Tapping into that desire to see behind the curtain, maybe gain some kind of knowledge or power through watching.
Potentially. Even if people rationalize it, say they're not directly harming anyone by watching, there's still an inherent intrusion.
Then there's the whole aspect of crowd psychology, how people behave differently in large groups.
Right. Thinkers like Gustave Le Bon talked about this. How in a crowd, you can lose your sense of individual identity. Your personal responsibility gets diminished. He called it submergence.
We get swept up.
Exactly. Emotions and ideas spread like wildfire contagion, and people become more suggestible, more likely to accept the group's thinking.
And the audience in the episode, even though they're watching on screens globally separated, they act like a crowd.
In many ways, yes. It becomes a kind of de-individuated mass. That loss of self-awareness, feeling less accountable because you're just one among billions.
Which helps explain that shift in public opinion we talked about.
It contributes, definitely. From this is horrible to he must do it. When it feels like everyone else is watching or demanding it, that creates this powerful sense of, well, Le Bon called it an impression of universality. Social media just amplifies that feeling today.
So how do individuals square watching or even demanding something like that with their own morals? There must be some mental gymnastics involved.
Oh, absolutely. This is where Albert Bandura's concept of moral disengagement is really useful.
Okay.
It basically explains the psychological tricks we use, often unconsciously, to switch off our usual moral standards so we can do or condone things we normally think are wrong.
How does that apply here?
Well, you see several mechanisms potentially at work in the National Anthem. There's moral justification, people telling themselves the PM's humiliation is necessary, lesser evil to save the princess.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then there's displacement of responsibility, blaming the kidnapper, he made us watch this, or blaming the government for not handling it better, shifting the responsibility away from yourself as a viewer.
Right, I'm not responsible, they are.
Exactly. And diffusion of responsibility is huge here. With 1.3 billion viewers, what difference does my one pair of eyes make? My individual contribution feels tiny, meaningless.
So you feel less personally accountable.
Precisely. You might also see disregarding or distorting consequences, focusing on the political trauma, the statement being made, rather than the actual human cost, the profound violation, callow experiences.
Or even using softer language.
Euphemistic labeling, yes, calling it a sacrifice or a necessary act instead of, bestiality and profound public humiliation. It sanitizes it.
It's quite disturbing how neatly those mechanisms seem to fit the audience's reaction in the story. You also touched on the performative nature of it all. It needs an audience.
Crucially, it's not just something happening. It's staged for an audience. Its meaning, its impact depends on people watching.
Like that film, Say Elvin.
That's a great parallel. John Doe's murders are like these grotesque sermons, and he needs the detectives, particularly Mills, to witness them, to receive the message for his work to be complete.
And Carlton Bloom is doing something similar. His art, his statement, only works if millions consume it, and if Callow is forced to participate.
Yes. The real horror, arguably, lies in that deliberate construction, creating a situation where the audience becomes, willingly or unwillingly, part of the spectacle, made complicit.
And that feeds into dehumanization, doesn't it? To watch something so degrading, you almost have to diminish the victim's humanity in your own mind.
I think so. That moral disengagement allows it. The crowd psychology encourages it.
Yeah.
You start to see the person less as a person and more as part of the show.
And maybe the act of watching itself collectively chips away at the audience's own humanity, too.
That's a profound point. That collective willingness to consume suffering could be seen as a kind of self-dehumanization. Bloom's art seems predicated on that very erosion of empathy.
And this idea of artistic intent or some higher purpose being used to justify cruelty, that feels like a recurring theme, too.
It's a classic manipulator's tactic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Claiming some grander goal to excuse horrific actions.
And it works on the audience, too. Makes it easier to watch.
It can. It reframes their role. I'm not just indulging morbid curiosity. I'm witnessing important art, a social commentary. It blurs that critical line between witnessing a crime and, appreciating a statement.
So within the episode, you've got different layers of complicity. There's just passively watching.
Contributing to the viewing figures, yes.
Then there's the active pressure, the public demanding he go through with it, especially after the finger arrives.
Which itself was a manipulation, remember?
Right. And even the government is complicit by hiding the fact the princess was already safe.
Mm-hmm. It all paints this picture of complicity operating at multiple levels of society. And it feels disturbingly familiar, reflecting things like bystander apathy or how online mobs can form.
Which brings us squarely to the present day, because even though this episode is, over a decade old now?
Yeah, aired in 2011.
It feels more relevant than ever.
It really does. I think that's because, as we said, technology mostly amplifies existing human flaws. Black Mirror holds up that dark mirror, and the reflection seems disturbingly accurate, maybe even more so now.
Think about online shaming, digital mobbing.
Exactly. It's like the modern version of the pillory or the stocks, but global, instantaneous.
And the characteristics are key, aren't they? The speed it happens, the sheer scale.
The anonymity or pseudo-anonymity that makes people bolder, less accountable.
The punishment often seems wildly out of proportion to whatever the original perceived offense was.
Absolutely. And there's no real due process. It's trial by social media, the court of public opinion, often without context or defense.
Plus, it sticks around. That digital footprint is kind of permanent.
Permanent digital baggage, yeah.
Yeah.
And the audience role is vital again. Every share, every angry comment adds fuel to the fire. It's that distributed complicity Again, the collective impact is massive, even if each individual action feels small, just like those 1.3 billion viewers.
And then there's the whole viral outrage phenomenon. It feels like outrage itself is a currency online.
It definitely drives engagement. Social media algorithms often seem designed to promote inflammatory content because it gets reactions. Outrage is highly contagious.
So you get these extreme headlines, polarized debates, echo chambers where everyone just reinforces each other's anger.
Lowering the threshold for indignation all the time, it maps directly onto the public's journey in the national anthem, their emotions being manipulated and amplified by the way information spreads.
So back to that mirror effect idea. Technology isn't creating these urges in us.
I don't think so, fundamentally. The history we talked about shows these desires to watch, judge, participate in moral dramas have been around for centuries.
Digital media just gives them a supercharged platform.
Right. Amplifies them through reach, speed, permanence, anonymity. That's why the public reaction in the episode, however awful, feels plausible. It taps into timeless flaws, just staged on a contemporary digital stage.
It's an uncomfortably close reflection of what we see happening.
And you can even see how platform mechanics, like likes and shares, almost gamify the process.
Gamify shaming.
In a way, yeah. Winning might be defined by how viral the shaming goes, how much damage is inflicted on the target, or how much social capital you gain within your online group by participating. The target becomes an object, and their destruction feels like a victory.
Which parallels the audience consuming callous suffering, almost like entertainment.
Precisely. And the structure of virality itself makes proportionality almost impossible.
How so?
Because the algorithms are built for speed and spread, not for context, nuance, fairness, or assessing intent. Once something hits critical mass, it's incredibly hard to slow down, correct the record, or add mitigating factors. Calls for, responsible shaming are really hard to put into practice structurally.
And we often see this outrage dressed up in the language of justice or activism.
Yes, performative social justice, perhaps, where the act of expressing outrage, maybe boosting the shamer's own reputation or providing emotional release, can sometimes overshadow genuine efforts towards constructive change.
Which circles back to Carlton Bloom again. His twisted artistic statement could be seen as a dark critique of exactly that, where the message overrides any consideration of the human cost.
It's a bleak interpretation, but yes. Digital activism can easily slide into just being another spectacle of righteousness, and the audience, by validating it, becomes complicit in that performance.
So, wrapping this up, the national anthem really serves as this incredibly potent, if disturbing, allegory about our appetite for spectacle and the audience complicity that comes with it.
Definitely. And it stresses that this isn't new. It's got deep historical roots. Technology changes the delivery mechanism, the scale, but not the fundamental human impulses.
Perhaps the true horror isn't the act Callow is forced into, but what the whole scenario reveals about us. Our capacity for sensationalism, that morbid curiosity, our willingness to watch, even passively participate in someone's degradation.
Especially now. Yeah. In this digital age where spectacles are manufactured constantly, spread instantly, consumed globally, the dangers of online mobs, disproportionate consequences, the blurring lines between calling someone out and just public shaming as entertainment, it's all very real.
It also makes you think about the kind of connection formed through these events. It feels very superficial, doesn't it? Billions watching. But it's based on voyeurism, not empathy. Maybe it actually increases alienation, paradoxically.
That's a really interesting point, this shared experience that isn't really about connection at all. And the episode taps into that unsettling desire for authentic transgression, for witnessing real suffering, even when it's manufactured or manipulative.
And that final coda is just chilling. His approval ratings go up, but his personal life, his marriage, is destroyed.
Yeah, it shows the lasting scars, personal and collective, even when public opinion moves on or rationalizes things in these strange, superficial ways. It highlights the disconnect between the spectacle and the real human fallout.
So the final thought for you, listening, as you reflect on this, maybe think about your own consumption of news, of social media, of mediated stories. Consider these vulnerabilities we've talked about, the pull towards spectacle, the ease of disengagement, and maybe ask yourself, in what ways might we all be, perhaps unconsciously, just humming along to a modern digital national anthem of spectacle?
It's definitely something that warrants critical self-awareness and perhaps a conscious effort towards empathy in how we engage online and with media.
A sobering thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.